Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Live. We're here with Bruno Lima, who's the co-founder and CEO of Pura. How are you?
I'm doing good. You doing well?
I am, decently enough.
Okay.
Good enough. We've got some tech summit stuff going on, and we've announced some pretty good speakers, so that's always a little stressy.
Saw Tim Cook. That's a big deal.
Tim Cook, Steve Ballmer so far. There'll be a few others. How's the room smell?
Could be better, you know?
Is there a solution for that?
Hey, I've heard of one.
Okay, talk about it a little bit, please.
Pura, man. So, yeah, we're a technology company in the home fragrance space. So what we provide is an IoT smart home solution, fragrance device connected through your Wi-Fi, control from phone, so you can adjust intensity, create schedules, choose away mode, swap fragrances. But the beautiful part about it, is the partner marketplace that we offer. So we actually partner up with a lot of top performing brands. Like we have a lot of ones coming, but we have your Disneys, your Capri Blues, Nest Fragrances, Apotheke, Lofco, some huge brands that we work with. We offer their fragrances directly to the consumer through retail or through a subscription model, and really focus on the user experience. That's we can help you guys out after this, make it a little bit better. Okay.
Yeah, we need some help. All right, so Scent Tech.
Scent Tech.
That's very cool. And do you guys think you kind of coined the phrase?
Yeah, it's I think the person who coined it is Richie, or the co-founder, Richie Stapler. So it's and if he didn't, we'll take credit here.
Take credit for it.
It's whatever at this point.
Okay. So in that description, I'll have a bunch of questions. By the way, audience, we'll open it up for the last little bit for 3 to 4 questions. So if you've got questions for Bruno, have those ready and don't be shy once we start with that phase of it. All right, so founding story, and then I'm going to have some questions about partners and points and various business models that you guys are implementing. So founding story.
Fantastic. It's actually a really good story. So my co-founder, Richie, him and I go back probably a couple years before the founding story, where I had a previous company, he had a previous company. Mine was on the service side. I ended up selling that company. He was very much on the app and creative design side of things, and so him and I bounced ideas back and forth quite a bit, just on the technology, just on entrepreneurship. We really, similar to everyone here, we really love the entrepreneurship world. And so one day he was actually doing the video for UVU, the local university here, for the UVU lecture series for entrepreneurship, where they were talking about IoT, smart home, Internet of Things. And he was talking to his family about, like, there's IoT for a little bit of everything. What is it that I'm not thinking about as a male consumer, And his mother-in-law came up with the idea, she said, I'd love to be able to control the fragrance in my house through a push of a button. And so he contacted me that day, and he's like, hey, what do you think about IoT for the home? I was like, this is, and I'm originally from Brazil. Richie has lived there for 2 years. He served an LDS mission. It's like a service mission that they do in Brazil for 2 years out there. And so he knew the Brazilians love fragrance, and I had the entrepreneurship background with him. And so we were like, well, let's take a look. And it kind of spun off of that. I mean, the funny thing is, him and I were off to the races in a very wrong direction. It's like we talk about, people always give a lot of hype to like the founding story, and we love sharing the founding story. But the truth of the matter is, it took probably another 2 years before we even got to the right track where we should be going. So I mean, we spent quite a bit of time just pivoting, doing consumer testing, trying to understand really what we thought customers wanted and what they really wanted. So it was quite a bit of trying to figure that out in the beginning.
Yeah. So unlike a software company, you guys have an actual product that needs to be invented, created, and made. I'm interested in how that went.
That's where those 2 years kind of drained out. So it's I mean, again, in software, if you're one good developer, you can kind of create a MVP or a beta device or beta software fairly quickly. I mean, I don't want to downplay it. It's still a difficult situation. But when it comes to hardware, it really comes down to, I mean, you got to show the customer enough for them to understand what you're doing, but you can't go out and create an MVP. An MVP in hardware really is, I mean, it's plastic, so it's 3D printed. Because if you actually go out and do a working prototype, I mean, I can't imagine a real good working prototype without probably dropping $1 million into it, right? Which is tough when you're broke. And funny enough, investors don't want to give you money when you're broke, you don't have experience, you don't know if customers like it. I don't know why, they don't want to give you that money. But it's, so it really came down to us focusing on creating some very early 3D prints. And even at 3D prints, we make it sound very simple, but to actually do the rendering, to find the right printers, to paint, even that costs money that, you know, we at the time didn't have. So it was a lot of hard work just trying to get the early days. What we did a lot of was just interviewing. We went to dozens of universities from here to California, really meeting with people and being like, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about that? We actually have shared this before, but the funny thing is when we met with students early on to try to kind of understand this feedback, it was often people would kind of tell you what they think you want to hear, right? Everyone wants to be nice. No one wants to be a jerk. So we actually had to shift our focus and start, I don't want to say lying, but telling people that we had a class, that part of the class we had to evaluate this product for a different company. And so we were like, we'd love to get your feedback for somebody else's company. And then people would open up a lot more about this. But it was very much a lot of consumer testing, showing designs, showing pictures, showing 3D prints, just trying to get people to understand. It was a lot of work early on, just faking it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's kind of what your background is in manufacturing engineering, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got the tinkerers, which you guys were in the garage or the basement, but then once you get to a certain point and it works and it looks good and it works repeatedly, then you have to figure out like manufacturing at scale, right? That's
a tricky jump, right? To go from, you know, yeah, this works. Here's one device that a customer told me they like, to let's create a manufacturing run, to do molds, to do partnership with the right fragrance house. I mean, even the fragrance side, I mean, when we talk about this, people try to think on the technology side because we're focused so highly on this technology. But even the fragrance side of it it's a whole different field. That itself is something that we had to come try to understand and contact the right people and try to kind of line that up. So that itself, it's this whole new field. So it was a pretty huge jump from one to the other.
Yeah, and we could probably talk for hours about how that all went. We just don't have enough time. But I know people are interested in what it takes to make that jump and have it in a factory and on an assembly line or however it's done. But
just believe it in your heart.
Believe it in your heart, good enough.
And get really lucky.
So what was the first fragrance?
Geez, the very first fragrance, I believe, was Pacific Aqua. It was one that we actually still have today. It's a more masculine scent. Again, today a large majority of our consumer base is female focused. So we do have a lot more female fragrances, probably like 9.9 to 1. But it's we early on, because Richie and I we both had our preferences, different things. We were focused on more masculine focused fragrances. So I think the very first one is a very masculine scent. So it actually still does really well to this day, but it's definitely not our best seller because today we have a lot more female fragrances.
Yeah, and we'll ask a few more questions about the fragrances because that's interesting how you guys have thought through that. But so you've got some momentum, and it's not on a PowerPoint anymore, and you've got some things that are working and you can show those. How did you guys start to think through the business model of how you can monetize this?
That's a good question. It's easy today to look back, right, and be like, oh, we definitely chose the right business model. It was very difficult. This was probably one of the hardest part. Obviously, creating the product, doing the whole beginning part is very difficult, but the business model is very tricky because once you kind of nail something down, you can pivot a little bit, but depending on where you go, right? If you go, are you going to focus just direct consumer subscription only, just retail? Are you focusing on MLM? Are you focusing, which we don't, by the way, but there's focus on so many different ones that we had to really try to understand. So we selected by doing a lot. I mean, I have so many memories of doing this, of whiteboarding the aspect of like pricing models and how do we price different brands as we're launching them. Do we tier them? Do we separate them? How does it work? Does this brand want to work with this brand? So we really kind of went back. Everything we do at Pura, kind of always goes back to consumer focus. I mean, we have a product team, and for those of you that aren't as accustomed to working product teams, typically you have your engineering team that actually engineers, and we have a product team that focuses on like what do consumers want, right? And then we have those other teams. But everything we do is our product team going back to consumers. I mean, today, obviously we have a lot more people, but our product team interviews over 100,000 of our consumers every month to try to understand if every little thing we're doing is on track. But back then, obviously, the team was much smaller, just Richie and I. And so we, again, going back to consumers and understanding, like, would you pay for this? How do you think about this? And a lot of it was trying to just sell, is just opening up for sale. What are customers willing to pay for? Okay, so many are buying this. Let's tweak it. Are customers buying this? Because no matter how many PowerPoint presentations you create or Excel docs or Google surveys, in the end of the day, if someone doesn't pay for it, they don't pay for it. So people tell you whatever. So it really was just trying to get customers to buy it and shifting the pricing model and the business model till we found something that has worked phenomenally well. I mean, today we're cash flow positive or profitable, which is not typical in a startup, especially one that's growing 1,000% year over year. And so it's worked really well for us, the business model that we selected.
Yeah, which is somebody buys the device, and then they get stuff in the mail.
Yeah, so we offer. You can purchase our device through retail. So we have our retail channels where it's more of the premium. Like we have like Sephora, Ulta, Anthropologie, Saks, Blue Mercury. Like all the Nordstrom, like the very high end ones. And then we also sell direct consumer, where you can go to our website or Amazon, and you can buy a starter pack, or you can choose a device, whatever fragrances you want. Or if you want, you can choose to subscribe, and it's a lower price, and so you kind of get that monthly, bi-monthly, tri-monthly, however you choose. And so our subscription is the most popular one because we offer that discount, and because there are more perks associated with the fragrance with the subscription, because we want to take care of our subscribers more than anything. And so they get a lot of different perks that the others don't. And so that's typically our most popular one, where customers will come, buy a device, and they'll subscribe to the fragrances. And then we ship it to them as needed. And they can always shift or pause or skip. It's very simple.
Got it. All right, so that's one of the models that you guys are implementing. You also have ambassadors and these fragrance partners. How does that all come together?
Yeah, so ambassadors is pretty interesting. So we have, as I mentioned, our subscribers, and then some subscribers will purchase so much and be such active subscribers that they're like, I'd love to be able to share this. I mean, a lot of them just organically share. Like even our first quarter this year, 20% of our revenue came from customers sharing with friends. And so it really helps, obviously, our marketing spend and everything. But it got to a point that we're like, customers are obsessed with the product. They love it. Let's make sure that, we're incentivizing them to share with their friends since they want to. And so what we do is our ambassadors, which are customers who are subscribers, can choose to become an ambassador. And all that happens is that if they share with their friends and their friends buy, they essentially get a percentage of that very first sale, right? So it allows them to basically, like, it's almost like the Uber, if you share a ride, get a ride kind of situation. We do that, but with fragrance. You almost give a fragrance, get a fragrance kind of situation for our ambassadors, which are kind of our preferred tier kind of thing.
Got it. And how many ambassadors do you guys have?
I'll have to pull the exact number, to be honest. Last time I took a look, I think it was something around 10,000.
Oh, wow.
10,000 ambassadors, yeah.
Very cool. And so they're incentivized, they get better deals, treated a little bit white glove.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a tier for us to make sure that they're that we're making sure that everything that they need, they have. But our subscribers or ambassadors are almost identical. It's just our subscribers can choose to basically get their own personal code to share with friends rather than just sharing it.
All right, the fragrance side, you'll have to explain this kind of from the beginning, because you guys aren't coming up with the fragrances, right?
So did you say we are coming up with the
You're
fragrance?
not.
It depends. So that's a good question. So for instance, like a partner brand, let's say Capri Blue. Capri Blue owns the candle Volcano, that blue candle everyone sees in the stores like Anthropology. It's the most popular candle in the U.S. So an example of Capri Blue or Nest or any of these phenomenal brands that have their fragrances, we partner with them. And they already have these amazing fragrances that customers love. And so we work with different fragrance houses. Today we work with the top 20 in the world. And these are the fragrance houses that do all the scents for your Dior, Chanel, Estee Lauder. And so we work with these fragrance houses and we say, here's this candle, you created this fragrance. We want this fragrance to work with this oil, and we have our own fragrance team, evaluator team, toxicology team. So we have an entire team at Pura that partners with the fragrance house to ensure that it is focused on, it works with our device, and it's the base that we want, it's the IP that we have kind of situation. So we focus on creating the fragrance that already exists. But then there's other brands like Disney. Disney, we launched them. And there was no fragrance for Elsa and Anna, which is the newest one. I think we just created it. The newest ones were the Disney princesses. Same thing, right? There was no fragrance for Belle. And so our perfumers, our evaluators, everything work with choose specific fragrance houses and create that for Disney, going back and forth saying like, what do you think about this? Does this smell like a Belle's rose? So it's kind of like creating that story. And so in some situations, we create it from scratch. In other situations, we just want to make sure it smells exactly like the fragrance everyone is already used to.
Very interesting. And so that's probably one of the funner jobs.
You know what? So me saying it here makes it sound like I have anything to do with it. We have Mara Dumsky. So Mara is our Chief Fragrance Experience Officer. She is by far the best person at Pura, and everybody knows that, so I can say that. But she has the best job. So she's the one that works with her team. Hope is in her team, evaluator. But it's her and Hope will kind of work with the different fragrance houses to ensure that everything is amazing. And it's a hell of a job, man. That's the job I wish I had, but I don't have the nose for it. But it's the best one for sure.
I can imagine. But so it wouldn't work like my favorite smell that I'd like would be like cut hayfield, some pine trees, and a little bit of skunk.
There we go, dude. You got a job at Pura. Nailed it.
Because then I know I'm in like a happy place. I'm out in the woods but that's not how it would work. Like I would get fired.
You'd probably be fired pretty quick, but it's, hey, you know what? A for effort, man.
Yeah. Well, if you ever have time.
We'll try it. Okay. I'll send it tomorrow.
Okay.
See what she says.
You never know. Very cool. And then with those partners, is there revenue split or what's the model on those?
It's a good question. So our goal is, and this is kind of the beauty where we sit, we're not a competition to we're partners to all these phenomenal brands. And so, yeah, there's absolutely the brands are receiving part of that. The very first thing we do is feed all the brands, right, before we feed ourselves. The goal truly is to build them not just with revenue and not just with this technology, but also to be just a technology arm for them. So we're constantly developing new products. Right now we're in the process of launching a lot of new phenomenal products. And it's working very closely with these brands to be like, what are your pains? What are some things that you and your consumers want? And we have an entire development technology product team that goes and we develop and create all these things for these partners. And so it really is, and how do we make you shine the best way possible? And in that way, it's very synergistic and we all grow together.
Got it. And I was unfamiliar with fragrance houses, but those ones are the kind of the fancy ones that are in the counters at like Macy's or Nordstrom's.
Yeah, so that's a phenomenal question because this is something that because we do it so often, I talk about it like everybody knows. Nobody knows what a fragrance house is. But basically, let's put it this way. You go and buy an expensive cologne, whatever brand it may be. Your imagination or your mind will tell you that brand, let's just, for example, let's say it's Dior. You go buy Dior. In your mind, you're like, hey, Dior created this. Truth of the matter is there's a fragrance house, a very phenomenal, multi-billion-dollar, some of them are $50 billion fragrance house that actually creates, and they have thousands of perfumers and thousands of scent scientists that are constantly creating new fragrances for specific brands. So when the brands come, they work with them to create it. And so there's probably it's hard to count exactly how many are. The 20 top ones are the ones that actually are very, very impactful, and those are the ones we work with. And so what happens is Dior would actually go to these fragrance houses. The fragrance house would create it. Dior owns the brand. They're the only ones that can use that fragrance. That fragrance house can't sell that scent to anyone else, but the fragrance house is the one that makes it for them. And so Dior doesn't have to have an entire lab team inside of their company. Now, Pura, the thing that we do is pretty interesting is, yes, we work with the fragrance houses, but rather than just work in the fragrance house, we have our internal also evaluators. We have our own toxicologists. We're actually on the verge right now of acquiring a company that is also focused on creating scent technology as well, and so that we can have everything in-house. And as we work with these fragrance houses, we can double down and actually get something even better out of it. And so they're phenomenal partners. These fragrance houses, it's a blast to work with them. You get some of the most creative things out of it because they're such experts in it, and then we can kind of bring our own expertise into it and create something really great together.
Got it. So I'm picturing these fragrance houses as folks that would kind of be interested and intrigued if somebody like you guys reached out with this idea, but also like, what? What was the reaction?
Yeah, it's funny. In the beginning when we first started the concept, started building out the product, we had one of our advisors. His name is Nigel Carr. So he was the advisor for Nest Thermostat, the one that sold to Google. At the time, they had just sold to Google, I think, for 3.8 billion around. Richie, 3.2. Thanks, Richie. But so Nigel came in as our advisor, and so his feedback was, hey, you guys are doing really great. Technology's looking phenomenal. Everything's fine. For fragrances, if I were you, I would reach out to these big fragrance houses. And he kind of threw out some names that we hadn't heard about because we weren't in the fragrance space. But his feedback was, they're not going to look at you because your minimum order quantity that you need to be doing a year, I think, is about 1 million units a year. And so at the time, obviously, we were below that. We had 0 units a year. And so we were like, hey, man, thanks for the feedback. We hung up the call. We went online, looked up the email of like all the executives and shot them all an email like, hey, here's what we have. Here's what we're doing. We'd love to partner with you guys. And so they actually flew us out to New York. We got to partner with one of the largest fragrance houses. They actually funded us in the beginning, non-equity. It was kind of a partnership deal that we were able to work out. And so it kind of allowed us to kind of get off our feet a little bit, having some of that funding to get things going. And so at first it was very much like, yeah, what is this? But then when they kind of saw it, they're like, this is pretty phenomenal, this is pretty significant. I'm excited about this.
Very cool. So are there nice people then that work at the fragrance houses?
Yeah, honestly. I haven't met a single hard person there. There was one, they quit. The rest of them are all great.
Cool. I'm just picturing like Devil Wears Prada. And
no, not quite. Okay. Not quite that bad. To be honest, it's our partners, and maybe it's just because we're growing so much, and so people are like, hey, Pura is legit. But our partners, our fragrance houses, it's salt of the earth people to work with. Honestly, we're very excited about it.
Yeah. All right. I've got a few more questions, then we'll open it up. So you've mentioned pretty substantial and fast growth, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Growing the team quite rapidly. As the CEO, what is your role in that growth, and how do you keep the train on the tracks?
It's a good question. I mean, it's not what I thought it'd be. I always thought my role would be doing a million things for everyone. It's very much supporting the team. It's making sure the right people are in the right places. I honestly can take very, very, very little credit for anything that's going on. We have, as I mentioned, we have our fragrance team focused on that. Our development team is phenomenal. Technology guys and gals, and we have the marketing team does a phenomenal job getting the word out. The branding team, we have some of the biggest people. We've really gone out and cultivated some of the best talent, and that's kind of where I come in just a little bit, is trying to help. I don't even find them. We have our team that actually goes out, our people team that finds the right talent. But I just get to meet with some of these new employees. I get to interview every single new employee, and it focused on, like, I mean, right now our head of product comes from HP, right? Our head of video comes from Apple. Before that, he's with Tesla, creative director there. So it's like all these different things are. I'd have to go through the whole team to explain, but everyone's phenomenal, right? You can get the idea. But it's me. My whole role in that is very much just supporting them, and it sounds cliche and it sounds boring, but it's absolutely true. And anyone in the company would admit, it's like, yeah, Bruno's just here to support us, right? I'm definitely the cheerleader there, and so it's a good team. I'm just lucky to be there with them.
Yeah. Part of the job of the CEO, as I understand it, is to not run out of money, and if you need more, go find it.
Yeah.
How's that process been?
It's good. So we've done primarily really great on not running out of money, since we're profitable, cash flow positive. I would say our CFO probably does a better job at that than I do. I'm usually the one that's like, should we do this? And he's like, nah, that's stupid. That would run out of money. But but that's really great. But we actually are. We're closing a fundraise round. It's actually as we speak. So my phone's literally blowing up as we've been speaking, because we're closing a fundraise round this week. We're still going to announce it, but it's at a unicorn status. So it's pretty fun. So things are going really well, and a lot of excitement. Got to meet some really great investors through that. Some phenomenal people coming into the team as investors with this round, so we're very excited about.
That's a big update.
Yeah, it's huge.
Congrats.
Thanks, man.
And technically this was kind of announced here then, huh?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to announce it here, so maybe or not, maybe or maybe not we're fundraising. It's supposed to be announced here in a minute.
Very cool. All right, let's open it up to questions from the audience, please.
So Silicon is generally digital and IT, and you're a product guy. So what was the strategy, or how are you taking advantage of the data, the IT side of it?
That's a good question. So again, I think everybody caught that, but the focus at Pura is, again, we do have a product that consumers use, just as Google Home or Alexa has a product that you physically interact with, or even Apple for that matter has a product you physically interact with. But the data side of everything that goes behind the scene is how we actually understand and learn how customers are using everything. So data is actually a huge part of our company to try to understand. So we're very much, we always say we're a technology and we're a data company in the fragrance industry. Trying to, even with our partners, we had meetings this week with our fragrance partners. We're not a fragrance company, so they don't have anything to worry about. We're a technology partner to try to feed them, and we do that through understanding the data, understanding the consumer, trying to create the best products for them. So yeah, data is king. Absolutely. Thanks, man.
It's been the story's been smooth sailing, but I'm sure there were some tough, challenging parts. I'd like to hear one of those more difficult parts that you had to go through.
Yeah, it was just so easy from beginning to end. Hardware, what? No, but it was very difficult. I mean, Richie and I, we had to sacrifice so much to be able to get to what we want. As I mentioned, investors don't want to give you money when you don't have the experience that you've done it before, and you don't have essentially a customer base. At the time, we thought investors were crazy. We're like, why are they not giving us money? This is such a brilliant idea. And now that I'm into it, I see that it's like, oh, after you create the product, you still have to convince people to buy it. I understand now why people didn't want to give us money. But truth of the matter is they should have given us money. They would have, like I said, unicorn status, y'all missed out. But it was very difficult. So what happened was, I mean, Richie and I, it wasn't a dumb decision. So we don't recommend everyone to do this because you hear about this and it sounds like cool, let's go do that. It was very well thought out. We strategically did this, but second mortgage in houses, sold cars, maxed out credit cards. I mean, we were doing what we needed to grow the business, but it wasn't an irrational decision. Like we were like, we're dumb, let's go do this. So again, this isn't our recommendation for everyone to go and do that, but it was the way that we did it. And thankfully it worked out for us because we strategically planned it out. But yes, it was very difficult. Thanks for making me remember all those sad times. Just kidding.
I saw another hand right here.
During production, is your production facility local here, or did you have to outsource?
We did. So our fragrances are all manufactured in the U.S. and we that's a lot local. But the hardware device was really difficult to manufacture in the U.S. We actually looked quite a bit, but because of the components, we had to go overseas. And so today we actually we have 3 manufacturers and work 2 different countries, and we're launching 2 more in 2 new countries. We always look at keeping the fragrance side, as I mentioned, stays here. We always look at possibly bringing in the U.S., and that's one of the options we're looking at right now. We're looking at some communities, more rural communities that are struggling and have had some of their main core business announced that they'll be removed in the next couple of years. And so we're talking through some local governments about possibly moving the entire manufacturing locally for the device. But as of right now, we've been doing all of those internationally.
Very cool. This has been fun.
Thank you. It has.
Obrigado.
De nada.
And congrats on the fundraising going on right now, and we appreciate your support over the years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.